Hi everyone, so welcome to this free class on Mary Magdalene. I had promised this, oh my God, maybe even 2 years ago, and life ensues, but here we are. So this is kind of in a series of free classes I've offered over the last few years. Um, the witch's goddess, the devil, the witch's Sabbath, ritual skills, things like that. And I have had quite a very personal, intimate devotion to the Magdalene for some time, and I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to talk about her, but also facilitate direct encounters with her. And also, therefore, talking about the context of how is it that there can be Christian, religious, or mystical figures mixed in with so-called pagan or pre-Christian or non-Christian religious and mystic figures. So before we continue, though, let us acknowledge country. So I invite you to be aware of your breath and as fully as possible turning up to yourself and yourself as held inside of something vaster, something primordial, something forever, which here in so-called Australia, many elders, many Indigenous people will name country, which is obviously the borrowing of an English word, but it doesn't mean what it does in English. So my understanding of country from listening and learning, reading, and hearing elders and activists speak is that country is the vast, interconnected, relational reality of belonging. And this doesn't just mean land, it also means sky, stars, sea, rivers, culture, songs, all forms of civilization, all forms of science and governing structures and kinship structures. And, you know, law, LAW, and sometimes LORE. So that's what is meant by country, just a tiny snapshot of my understanding of that ineffable thing. And mostly, probably where we are living in each of us in stolen land. Some of us live in Turtle Island, some of us live in so called Australia. And I know some people who are often on these calls live in parts of South America, also stolen land, and parts of Europe which is complicated because a lot of the powers that the imperialist colonialist powers that then went on to colonize and continue to occupy these stolen lands came from there, and those countries still benefit from the colonization that still happens. So just bringing your attention to that, bringing your attention to all of this, and first and foremost, just remember where you are. And if you know the names of the people of this place, here in Australia, we might say traditional owners. Sometimes people say custodians. Sometimes people say first peoples, right and true peoples, traditional peoples, stewards. And really, that's for Indigenous people to articulate for themselves. So those are some of the words and names and titles I have seen used. And just thinking and feeling into the names of the place you're in, the names of the people that they call themselves. Maybe there's several names. Maybe you whisper them as a sign of gratitude, respect, and humility, willingness to learn and listen. I'm in Gadigal and Bidjigal country. I acknowledge the elders of the Gadigal and Bidjigal people, past and present, and I acknowledge those emerging. I acknowledge that this land was never ceded, it is sovereign, that it has been stolen and continues to be occupied by the British Crown. I acknowledge the strength and survival of Indigenous people in the face of continued occupation and colonization. I acknowledge their sciences, their cultures, their traditions, their law, their customs, their ceremonies, their kinship structures. I acknowledge their old people, the old ones, the dreaming creators. I acknowledge the songlines. So, as much as you can, pour your energy, your awareness, your attention into this acknowledgement, not as a box to tick or something that we have to do, but as a magical act. And I learned most of what I know about this from Raphael Lavallee, who is a Narago person and a friend of mine. So just feeling into this acknowledgement as magically, potently as possible. Bring your attention fully to this. Okay, so now I'm just going to remind you that this is being recorded. So if you want to make sure that you're not seen, please turn off your camera or change your name. But this is largely just recording me, and it should only see me at this point. So let us also ground so that we can be as attentive as possible to the magic that moves through this convergence. So I do this with my eyes open. I'm staring at the wall in front of me, but also at all of the plants that happen to be in the space between me and the wall. So you can do what you like. Of course, you can close your eyes, you can stretch, you can get up. If you have to be down, you're down. Do what you need, massage yourself. Ah, and if you haven't heard yourself do any heavy or loud or even just slightly more than breathing sound, do an exhalation out of your mouth, several of those. Ah, and let it be long. Let it be longer than the in breath. Ah. And when the breath out of the mouth is longer than the in breath, when you give sound, when you sigh and even shake a little, this really helps your parasympathetic nervous system. And as there is so much to be anxious about, so much to be traumatized by constantly, this is really helpful. Maybe you have anchors that you have made, somatic, gestural, verbal, visual anchors, and maybe they are anchors of grounding, centeredness, lucidity, adaptability. Maybe you make those anchors. Maybe you say those anchors. Mainly focusing on the out breath. But then, of course, the more you breathe out, the more room you make for the in breath to sweep in, to sweep in. Rivers of starfire, rivers of silver, rivers of plasmic blue flame. From the heart of stars, feel this charging, invigorating, cleansing force. Ah. I believe that mystics, spirit workers, witches, magic makers have been doing this kind of thing since time immemorial, that we have been drinking in starlight and grounding into the earth since time immemorial. Feeling your roots sink in, make magic, make love, make connection with the mycelial threads. Feeling the fires of the earth, the fires in the heart of stars, the dreaming darkness, the light, the water, the earth, the air, the fire. Feeling this saturate your cells, moving through you, quaking through the threads of you. And feeling this come down into your fierce, fragile, precious, powerful, divine, human, animal heart. Feeling that also rise up, feeling the above and the below, the left and the right, the before, the behind, meet, mix, mingle, marry in your heart. And to borrow inspiration from the context and the source of Mary Magdalene herself, who is both a woman of history and a woman of myth. She was a Palestinian Jewish woman. And so there are particular words that we can say in English that are translations of the words she would have said. So something I have said for a long time, something that helps me to ground, be centered in the cosmos, feel my sovereignty, my self-possession, my belonging to the ground of my own being, to God herself, is these words. I am that I am. I am all that I am. I am that I am. I am all that I am. I am that I am. I am all that I am. I am that I am. I am all that I am. I am that I am. I am all that I am. And so feeling those words resonate through your being, maybe you write them down, maybe you sing them, maybe you incant them as I have just done. Notice how you feel. I am that I am. I am all that I am. This is a translation and an adaptation of something that the God of the Jews is said to say about themselves. And so this would be the same God as the God of the Kabbalists, the ancient and complex mystical tradition that arises out of different Jewish communities. And so deeply aware as well that as I facilitate this, I am not Jewish, I am not Palestinian, and there is a great tension in the zeitgeist and a false a dichotomy duality that is often held up around these groups of people, often people too who might be each other. So just remembering that there is that tension in the world and that there is a genocide and that we are directly communing with a woman of a place that was called Palestine by many cultures in that region at that time, and a place that was called Judea, which was occupied by imperialist Rome. And of course, Rome, we still live, I think, in the wreckage of Rome. And so we can see all around us, when I see the fires in LA and when I see the floods in certain Southeast Asian countries right now, and when I think of the genocides happening all over the world, I still think of the wreckage of Rome and of how it has been commandeered by capitalist forces. And of course, a lot of this has been pushed forward by particular forms of religious extremism that are largely, Christian, apparently. And so that is something I just want to talk about briefly because I'm often critiqued by people in my own community as how can I be a witch and love Mary Magdalene and Christ and things like that. And I get it. I actually did not grow up Christian. Of course, many of my mother's recent ancestors and for generations were Protestant or Catholic. Um, and so that's in me, and the culture and the society that I mainly grew up in, deeply Christian, all around me to the point where I had to really figure out what that meant as someone who was raised Balinese Hindu inside of a Christian container and then realized they were a witch at age 11, an abomination, and realized they were queer and trans and further abomination. So, according to certain ideas. So, the way I understand mystical forms of any religion, um, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, paganism, Christianity, is that mysticism is about intimacy with the sacred, the divine, with the mystery. I don't consider myself as adhering obediently or faithfully to any one religion. I have cultural religiosity. I have cultural ethnicity. I am a witch, which for me is much more of an ontological cosmic reality than it is anything to do with a spiritual tradition or a religious adherence. I happen to be a witch. And of course, I have a lot of interest in pre-Christian or um, syncretic. Some of the things we consider pre-Christian as modern witches actually came after Christianity. But syncretic or adaptive forms of folk culture, which we would now call pagan culture, mixed in with like Islam or Judaism or Christianity, as is quite normal. Human cultures, human cultures do this all the time. Syncretism happens all the time. And so my witchery, my spirit work, my mysticism is therefore necessarily quite syncretic. And my relationship to things like so-called Catholic saints or folk saints or the Magdalene or Christ is deeply syncretic and seen from the view of Orthodox forms of the church or Christianity would be deeply heretical because I relate to these beings and mysteries as avatars or expressions or parallel fractals of older forces. And I feel and imagine and experience that these older primordial forces sometimes adapt and ride these beings or these stories or these myths in order not only to survive, but to have new life in the world. Of course, the Magdalene is herself. She has her own context, as did Christ. And so, if you are interested in the historical Jesus, then the book I'd recommend to you is Reza Aslan's Zealot. I've read it several times. It's very, very compelling. Um, it talks a lot about the context of Judea at the time and of the messianic Jewish rebellions against empire and of a Jesus who was not all that peaceful. And so there's a bit of a tension between the Jesus of history and the Christ of faith, to borrow the exact phrase that Reza Aslan uses. And there is also a tension between what we do know of the Mary Magdalene in the Gospels and what the later church said about her, and then what is said about her now. Obviously, one of those things is that she was a penitent sex worker. And of course, the word that Pope Gregory the First used was not sex worker, right? And that happened in the late 6th century, that this Pope decided that Mary Magdalene was, a so-called sinful woman who, yes, she had had 7 demons, exorcised out of her, but that she was also conflated with Mary of Bethany and also this other unnamed woman who also washed or oiled the feet of Jesus, right? So this was all conflated together. And nowhere in the Gospels does it say that any of these women were sex workers at all. But that was the direct inference slash almost like new rule, new law, new idea, I guess, that Pope Gregory the First put out there. And it really affected the way Mary Magdalene was seen throughout the medieval period into the early modern period. And it wasn't until very recently in the 20th century that that was cleared up by another pope. Um, so historically, the Mary Magdalene that is in the Gospels would not have been a sex worker, but nor am I interested in any kind of like moralism around that, because she is still the Mary Magdalene that is part of mystery, who is a hypostatic like kind of vessel crossroads for many truths. Um, she does hold within herself multiple conflicting truths, which are different from historical facts, right? But they are true. So Mary Magdalene, the Mary Magdalene of mystery, the Mary Magdalene of divinity, is does have within her a lineage of holy harlots, does have within her the sex worker, does have within her, the sacred prostitute, as some people will, happily reclaim. Um, she also is her name Magdalene. Obviously, Mary is a kind of what is it? An anglicized version of a Greekified, of a Hellenized version of a Hebrew name, which would have been Mariam or Miriam. So, and there's a lot of Miriams, right? That's a very common name. So Magdalene, she's named in the Gospels more than some of the male apostles. She is also considered to be the apostle of the apostles, and the recent Pope, Pope Francis, actually made that a canon. So she is the apostle of the apostles. She is the great witness to the resurrection. Um, she is through apocryphal texts, so texts outside of the kind of legitimized Bible. She is this beloved of Christ. She is considered to be somewhat of a master in a way of his teachings. And sometimes it even seems she might have even more elevation. Again, a lot of the ideas of Christ's divinity were deeply debated and continue to be debated, but were debated through blood, sweat, and tears, literally, through the first centuries of the Common Era in many councils and many holy wars. So there were definitely sects of Christianity back then, and actually they still exist in some form, that did not believe that Jesus was divine, but that Jesus was a man. Whereas other sects would be like, oh, man and divine at the same time, as if these things are actually different. So again, like I am not a Christian at all, but I do have connection to these forces, and that's for me a very natural thing. Of course, I'm paying attention to the world as it is. Um, I am a deep devotee of the old gods, quite proudly so. And these kind of newer gods, sometimes I feel are avatars of them or expressions of them, or also just new gods who, as an animist, as a polytheist, as a spirit worker, as a mystic, I encounter and recognize their divinity. That's far more interesting to me than blocking them. And I get it. I get why people don't want anything to do with them as well, because they unfortunately do belong to this pretty horrific kind of Gordian knot of oppressive forces. Ironically, because because Christ and Magdalene and a lot of these saints and apostles were totally anti-imperialist, anti-oppression kind of activists. So Magdalene means something like the tower. Some scholars believe that she is from a particular place that bears that name. Other people believe that epithet, if you will, that title, that name, is actually trying to give credence to her power and significance. She is considered to be in the Gospels a woman of great means and resources, and potentially even funded the ministry of Jesus, right? So, and in some gospels, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, these are so-called Gnostic Gospels. They don't exist in the New Testament. They don't exist in the Bible as it is right now, but they did exist and do exist. They often talk about her as having extra esoteric knowledge, and sometimes even Saint Peter himself will refer to her and beg her or ask her to reveal to the rest of the apostles the knowledge that she has that the Master Jesus did not reveal to the others. And so you can look all of that up. This class is not about the Gnostic Gospels at all. It is about Magdalene herself. Uh, so I'm curious. I'm just going to pause this recording. Okay. So the I kind of want to track back to, um, I guess something I alluded to. So obviously the term pagan, for me is a very complicated term. I haven't identified that way for several years now, since probably 2017. I sometimes will go, if someone asks me if I'm pagan, I'll say sure. But in the same way that I would if someone asked me if I was Wiccan, right? So And the reason why is because, sometimes words are meant to just be approximations and help there to be kind of like some kind of compassionate I don't know, entry understanding. But one of the reasons I struggle with the term pagan more and more is because of the history of it as applied by colonial forces to everyone that isn't Christian. um, so and this is just a huge like conglomeration, amalgamation, kind of blanket over many, many, many deeply distinct ethnic, land-based, bioregional cultures. Um, but and so there's a tension for me there, I guess. But then the other thing that comes up for me as someone who did identify as pagan for so long, um, is that sometimes when I'm reading histories of the creation of institutional churchianity, Christianity, kind of onward from Constantine, and the vision of St. Paul's Christianity is quite radically different to the Christian. Well, let's just call it the Christ following Jewish sects, because there was a big tension in early Christianity between you know, Peter's Christianity and the brother of Jesus's Christianity and St. Paul's Christianity, St. Paul who never met Jesus. And he had a Christianity that was more for the Gentiles, that didn't require circumcision, which is a part of the Jewish law, that didn't require Jewish law. And so he spread his vision, like Christological vision of Christ as like the cosmos in a way, the spirit of the cosmos, the intercessory, intermediary way between you and the infinite. Which is, I'm not saying that that's wrong. I think there's a lot of marvelous beauty in it. Um, but Pauline Christianity became Constantinian Christianity, became, what we now think of as the Roman Catholic Church. And of course, in the first few centuries, as Rome died and kind of thrashed dying, and as it annexed and invaded all of these sovereign territories, um, and as it outlawed, some of the emperors began to outlaw pagan ritual and sacrifice. And of course, what then happened was that you couldn't be pagan in public. You could be killed or imprisoned for your so-called paganism, which of course now it was called paganism. And so I do have a lot of anger at that, because that also begins a whole process of religious colonialism. And really, that form of the church still exists today and still has a lot to answer for. So I do want to say that, because I understand why people abhor the church. I think that is a just critique. Um, and I think it's really important, as well as someone who sometimes is a pagan, that I want to speak that aloud, because I think there is still the echoes and the continuing devastation of that colonial religiosity. But again, the Magdalene for me doesn't fit anywhere in that. As someone said in their share, like, I do believe and experience the Magdalene as an outsider. There is also all of these medieval stories about after the crucifixion. So after she witnessed the Christ resurrected and all of this, and she was the one who told the men, etc., etc., that she and Martha and maybe Mary of Bethany, if she wasn't conflated with her at the time, maybe Lazarus, a group of them got on this rudderless boat, and they ended up in Marseille in the south of France. And, there's a very, very, very Catholic ideas of what happened there, because, of course, they turn up and they convince the governor of that area to stop being a pagan, da 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 da. So there's that level. But there's this other level, this folk level, where where the Magdalene becomes like this forest hermit, covered in hair, which very interestingly kind of has a parallel, relates to other biblical figures who are covered in hair, like the Queen of Sheba, who was in the Old Testament, said to be beloved by King Solomon, and who was definitely cast as a pagan queen. a worshipper of idols, and who at times also was able to persuade King Solomon to create shrines and altars to these so-called demons and idols, right? But to these ancient goddesses, right? So Queen of Sheba is as well someone who has become, in my mind and in the minds of some folk, her own goddess figure or her own radical feminine divine figure. As well as this, we have Lilith, um, who appears apparently in some Old Testament scripture, but no one really knows if that's the medieval Lilith, who, Lilith herself has become, that's a whole other story, but she has become her own being too. And I also kind of want to say that there is a whole new age understanding of beings like Lilith and beings like Magdalene that I don't necessarily connect to, but I'm not going to poo-poo actually, because I do feel that these forces and beings have their own agendas, and that they can touch many people in spite of their cosmology theology, and that they appear in many forms. And so, of course, there's all these channeled writings in some what I would call New Age ideologies, where these people have channeled these ideas that Mary Magdalene and Jesus Christ were practicing an ancient form of Tantra, which I could historically critique, but magically, metaphysically, I think that's very interesting. And, we only have to look at a very popular novel that actually had a great deal of impact on the social egregore, the zeitgeist, which is Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code. There are many ideas in the Da Vinci Code that actually do have centuries of historicity behind them. It's just that the way he, wove it all together in his trash bag novel, which was fun at the time for me to read, was not so lucid. And of course, he absolutely ripped off the work of several scholars and several people, spiritual and religious people, without ever really crediting them. Um, and so this idea of Mary Magdalene as potentially the wife of Jesus, there are some even scholars, they would be considered renegade or maverick scholars, who believe that to be true, historically accurate. I think it's kind of mythically true. And certainly, when I say wife, I don't mean legal marriage. I mean like beloved of. And also, sometimes I think John, the beloved John was also, maybe they were a triad. I think of Mary Magdalene and the beloved John and Christ as this beautiful, romantic, sensual triad. They could have been demisexual, asexual in our modern terms, even. They might have been completely kinky. I don't know. Like, I can project all I want onto them, and that's the thing. They allow that. These beings kind of allow that. The Magdalene is, beloved in many, many, many forms of Christianity, but she is also rejected in Christianity. She is an inconvenient truth. And interestingly, she shares a name with another inconvenient truth, which is Mary, Mother of God. And if we are being semi-reductive, but also maybe semi-culturally accurate, often people who are assigned female at birth, or people who are women or femme, are often either allowed to be in patriarchal culture one of two things. They are only allowed to be Mary, Mother of God, the mother, the devotional, obedient, faithful, kind of stick to your job, Mary, Mother of God, or the harlot, the slut, right? Those are the two options for femme people or for women. And so this is a tragedy, but it is also an inheritance. And so all of this is present. All of this is present when we invoke the Magdalene. These were the women at the crucifixion. These were the people there. John the Beloved was there too, also remembering that. John was there at the crucifixion. But then Mary Magdalene witnessed to the resurrection. In my response to a kind of rhetorical question that was asked in the share, is that these are apocalyptic times, not that these are the only apocalyptic times. And when I say that, I want to also say something, and I can't remember who first taught me this, but it's something that I now just say all the time. The world has ended over and over again for many, 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 many indigenous groups of people, the world has already ended. And then for a lot of white people, a lot of white folks, or people living in countries like, the so-called US, especially privileged people living in that country, this idea that the world is ending now or in the last 10 years because of things like climate crisis, economic collapse, Trump, like this is also, I guess, a form of apocalypse. Remembering that apocalypse comes from the Greek to remove the veil, to lift the veil. So, so Mary Magdalene and Christ are apocalyptic figures. They are figures to me of a transmission of truth and revelation. And I'm aware that revelation is a complex term, a triggering term perhaps, but it is a term nonetheless that is totally connected to Magdalene and the Christ. And these figures, I believe, are very, very, very present at this moment. Um, because of things happening in Palestine, things happening in the Congo, things happening in West Papua, things happening everywhere, and certainly, the demise of the death throes of patriarchy, the death throes and the collapse of this corporate consumerist capitalism that really has reached its obvious limit. So, in saying all of that, I believe it is now time to do some trance work. So when you're ready, I invite you to maybe you need to stand and move through this trance work. Maybe you need to lay down. Maybe that's already happening for you. Maybe you're sitting. And maybe you close your eyes. Maybe you leave them open. I invite you to notice the river of breath that is pouring through the landscape of your being. When I enter trance, I like to begin to slowly rock back and forth. For you, you might be very still. For you, you might be dancing or writing at the same time, or scribbling, or drumming, or humming. Whatever helps you to sink into yourself. Following your breath, let us begin to count the breath as mystics have counted breath since we have been in caves and plains and trees. As we breathe into the count of 4, as we hold to the count of 4, and this is your 4, whatever 4 means for you, as we exhale to the count of 4, as we hold to the count of 4. And if you can't hold those breaths, that's okay. Breathe in the way that serves and nourishes you. Counting the breath that serves and nourishes you. Maybe for you, it's more of an breathing into the count of 4 and holding to the count of 2. And then breathing out for 4 and then holding for 2. Whatever serves and nourishes your breath. Maybe you hear yourself sigh. Sinking, 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 sinking with the breath, sinking. Sinking through the soles of your feet, sinking through your pelvis, sinking. I invite you to imagine, sense, perceive that you are in a dark room, a room lit by a single flame. A single flame lights up this cavern, lights up this room. And in this room, either you are Mary Magdalene or you are right next to her. You can hear Mary Magdalene praying. Maybe words like Elohim, Adonai, Asherah, words of Aramaic or Hebrew, words that come out of her indigenous body. And you see her face in the flame, in the light. Can you feel yourself as her in the pregnant darkness in the room? The woman who is like a tower, the woman who is a tower. She is praying for the world. She is praying for her own lands to be free of oppression and occupation by oppressive empire. She is praying for the salvation of her people, perhaps not from something we now think of as sin, but from oppression from within and without. She is praying for liberation. Is she holding something in her hands? Does she smell of particular fragrance and oil? If you are feeling yourself as her in this room, what are her hands like? Her hair, her eyelids, her feet, her breasts, her belly, her skin, her tongue. How is it to breathe as the Magdalene breathes? The dark room begins to fade away, the dark cavern, and she is there in the seas, at the edge, looking down at a land full of war, and has continued to be filled with war since she lived upon the earth. Perhaps you witness the crucifixion. What would it be like to be gathered under a crucifix, maybe three on a hill, on a mount, in a place of death, in a place of empire? For the crucifix is not a symbol of any religion, but a symbol of torture, a symbol of obedience to Rome. Maybe you are there witnessing the crucifixion. And who is on that cross? Is it a man? Is it humankind? Is it Mary Magdalene herself? Is it the earth? There are many things that are on that cross, crucified by empire. This is not something that happened 2,000 years ago and stopped happening. It is a truth that continues to happen. It is a fact. Perhaps for you, this trance is more remembering in the body of Magdalene how it felt to witness it. You get to choose this, or perhaps you are there witnessing it. The Magdalene is the sacred witness of death and rebirth. Let the trance take you where you need to go, perhaps to the rebirth, the resurrection, perhaps to the boat that goes to the south of France, perhaps to the Grail legends, to the forests, to the Black Madonna. Allow the trance to take you, to see and feel and know what you need to see or feel or know. O Magdalene of the hidden tower, O Magdalene of the holy hour, pray for me as you witness the world. Pray for me as you witness the world. O Magdalene of the stormy sea, O Magdalene of the greenest tree, O Magdalene, pray for me as you witness the world. Oh, as you witness the world. O Magdalene, beloved of Christ. O Magdalene, the holy harlot. O Magdalene, pray for me, as you witness the world, as you witness the world, as you witness the world. And perhaps the journey of the Magdalene in the last 2,000 years of recorded history has been the same journey as the journey of the witch, who in times before has always remained the outsider seeing in, feeling in, the witness to the death and rebirth of things, then cast out like seven demons, classed as a heretic, a harlot, a whore, cast out, made to have the hair of those who are deemed to be full of demons, made to bear the skin of those who are demonized, made to be covered in hair like a creature of the forest, so mighty and beautiful, and then claimed again, even by those who had originally cast her out. Perhaps the Magdalene and the witch are holding hands. You are invoked, Magdalene the priestess. You are invoked, Magdalene the zealot. You are invoked, Magdalene the witness. You are invoked, Magdalene the lover. You are invoked, Magdalene the wealthy one. You are invoked, Magdalene the prophet. You are invoked, Magdalene the beloved. You are invoked, Magdalene the witness of devastation. I pray to you, Magdalene, that you inspire those of us who are willing to receive your Holy Spirit in these times, those who bear hearts lifted to you. In these times, if we are willing, may you inspire us to know the way forward, for you are the one of many who knows the way forward through times of devastation, loss, fear, and doubt. O great woman who is the tower that is mighty and hidden in the heart, who travels the stormy seas, who meditates in the forest, who was the most beloved saint for hundreds of years. We call to you, Magdalene. And I invite each of you, perhaps you have a hidden prayer, a wish, a spell that you want to work with her. Maybe you start to write some of this out, or draw some of this out, or sing some of this out as you skillfully move the trance into the magic of expression, whether privately, just for yourself, or for a particular place or time or people, or for the world. Magdalene of the hidden tower, O Magdalene of the holy hour, O Magdalene, pray for me as you witness the world, as you witness the world, as you witness the world, as you witness the world. Remember your grounding cords, your roots, yourself as a tree or a stone, yourself as primate, as cousin to gorilla, chimpanzee, bonobo. Remember yourself as divine human animal. Remember yourself, perhaps as an ally and accomplice to the Magdalene. Perhaps this work has invigorated, reminded you of other gods and mysterious ones, goddesses who you are allied with, ancestors, spirits, a cavalcade, a cacophony, a coven of beings. Perhaps you draw down or channel out that map of relationships that you are within, that the Magdalene might bear witness to. As you write or you sing or you draw or you meditate, I invite you to ground, 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 and return from the trance state. Hi, everyone. Thank you for participating in this working. I view most of the kind of way I do classes and workshops as a kind of spell or prayer or working. So I hope that you take the ripples and the effects of this in whichever way you are guided or inspired or provoked to do so. I want to offer that this book here, which I'm not sure how easy it is to get, is a very, very good compilation. It's an anthology of, multiple different scholars and theologians and mystics. So it's called Secrets of Mary Magdalene, the Untold Story of History's Most Misunderstood Woman. edited by Dan Burstein and Anjay de Kaiser. Um, yeah, it's great. It has such a compilation of things from a variety of perspectives. Um, I guess what I want to say is that how I want to wrap this up is that the Magdalene is, I think, available to us all. I know that some people might hesitate, especially non-Christians, to maybe even Christians more so, but non-Christians may hesitate to go to her because she's considered to be so Christian. Um, what I have personally found is that while the Christ and the Magdalene aren't always at the center of my life, and they're not necessarily in the inner court of my beloveds, um, that they are very welcome and that they welcome me and that they have never asked me to convert. My mystical experiences with both of them have never been about religious adherence at all. And I have had very intense visionary experiences with both of them. Um, Something I'd invite you to contemplate. I got a lot out of contemplating in trance and meditation. What are the seven demons of Mary Magdalene? And if we take this idea of demons as kind of contortions or complexes within ourselves, suppressions, as repressions, as parts of our, psyche that have fragmented, broken off, and might be thinking that they are carrying out a role or a task that we as a whole have ordained, but in fact no longer need and has become dysfunctional. So what could these demons be? Um, Obviously people have connected them to the seven deadly sins that are part, I guess, of Roman Catholic lore. Um, but that's not what I think they are. I once did, I'll have to find the notes, but I once did come to a place that really satisfied me when I was on a teaching team getting ready to teach at 2020 California Witch Camp before that all didn't happen because of the beginning of the COVID pandemic. But um, that camp did in fact later happen, as someone said, because they went to it. But the the way of like looking at demon work in that way can be very profound. If you want resources on that from a witch's perspective, I have an entire chapter on that in The Witch Belongs to the World. That's from the witch perspective. There's also in Tibetan Buddhism, if that's a part of your background or discipline, or you could research this, there's a practice called Chod, um, that is about feeding demons and honoring and transmuting them. Um, there are all kinds of parts work in psychotherapy or psychotherapeutic models that you can also connect in with. There are several people in our community who are practitioners of various kinds of parts work. Um, there is someone that I go to. I was like, should I say their name? I don't know. I don't know. I think I'll leave their name out for internal family systems parts work, which someone just mentioned here, which is IFS, internal family systems, which is very, very useful. Um, so I would invite you to consider the what are these demons and why were they cast out? And also just considering and meditating on the Magdalene as the witness to the world, as the and who is she on her own too, right? Because so often do we cast these, especially female, feminine, femme figures in history and myth as holding everything. And so, yes, she is the witness to the world. She is that strong. She can be that strong. She is that strength. And who is she also on her own as a person? And I find that to be the most fascinating line of inquiry at times. Who is this woman who, may be a prophet, may be a woman of means, who may be a priestess, who may have fled and gone to the south of France, or in some legends, Britain? Did she have a daughter named Sarah? Did she, was she the wife, the beloved of Christ, or John? Some people say John. So John the Evangelist. So, who who is she really? That is something we'll never know in factoid sense. But there are ways, as we all know and practice, um, mystical, magical processes and ways of relating intimately to these forces and invoking them. So you might sing to her, you might drum with her, you might sit in silence or lay in silence or walk in silence, observing with her. Something that I did just before I entered this call, I work with the tarot very intimately. I teach the tarot, I read the tarot, and I have to tell you, only today did I consciously look down. I said, "Oh, I want to bring the High Priestess card. I want to bring the High Priestess card," which historically was never called the High Priestess. It was called the Popess. It was only called the High Priestess in I think like the late 18th century onwards, as the tarot became conflated with all kinds of interesting ideas. But I looked at the major arcana or the trumps, and I suddenly had this epiphany that actually, like the major arcana is many things, but one of the things it could be is the journey of the Magdalene. And I looked at the major arcana, and I looked at this at everything in there: the tower, the star. I have here death, the tower, the star, the world, the judgment card, and the high priestess. And I had this moment, and I have not consciously come across it, but I had, and so I'm going to be doing some meditation and trance work into this. But I feel like the major arcana could tell me a lot about the Magdalene herself. And so I invite you to follow that line as well, or that spiral, or that labyrinth of inquiry. So thank you so much for being here. Um, some churches honor her feast day on July 22nd, if you want a day, which very beautifully for me, as someone born in the Southern Hemisphere on July 23rd, actually is happening while I'm celebrating my birthday. So I have always felt this gorgeous synchronicity with the Magdalene. I also want to honor my biological great grandmother, whose name was Magdalene, um, and honor that lineage as part of my lineage as well. So, so many blessings to you all in these times of extreme devastation and hope. And may we find our way, and may we, tend to each other and take care of ourselves and each other, because that really is perhaps one of the only things that makes sense. May we nourish each other in these times. May we make each other laugh. May we witness each other cry. May we do our best as frail, strong, queer, complex beings. And so much love to you all, and have lovely days and nights. Mwah.